In the year 1975, our renowned Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared an emergency throughout the nation, and the fundamental rights of the people got suspended for the next 2 years. Several opposition leaders were put behind the bars, and this era marked a history, and it was considered as black mark tarnishing Indian democracy. In this video, we will come across what were the exact reasons for declaring an emergency and why it is considered so terrifying. We will come across all this topic about the thrilling event in depth. Welcome to Online Legal Vakil, and today we will discuss about the real story behind Indira Gandhi's emergency. Well, before we start off with the video, we must know the answers for the major two questions. Was emergency declared, and why was emergency declared? Was declaring emergency of India the first incident ever in the history? Surprisingly not, 1975 was not considered as the first time when an emergency was declared in a country. Before declaring Indian emergency, during 1962 Indo-China War and during 1971 Indo-Pakistan War, emergency was declared. However, the emergency which was declared in 1975 was totally different on all the grounds that the emergency was not just based on a particular reason or war. The solid reason behind the emergency of 1975 were multiple sequence of events which took place. So, we must understand the total number of sequences which took place that lead to the calling of an emergency by the President and the emergency period during the Indira Gandhi's government. So, the sequence of events was begun in 1969 when the Congress party was in power and the fourth 5-year plan was implemented. So, basically, the first trigger to this incident happened in 1969 when Congress party decided to nationalize 14 private banks, transferred the bank ownership to the government. In this picture, we can see the picture of the ex-Prime Minister Srimati Indira Gandhi. And this is a paper cutting which depicts that 14 top banks were nationalized. Huge big shot investors, businessmen, shareholders were unhappy with this decision and opposed the same. However, the justification was provided by Indira Gandhi behind the scheme was that if the banks could get the nationalized, then banks could reach every nook and corner and provide services to every citizen, including the poor community citizens. In 18 July 1969, the government decided to pass it through an ordinance. But the parliament was due to begin in 21st July. And the president will leave the office on 20th July. Therefore, ordinance was drafted in no time and was signed by the president. So, we can see that on 18 July, it was decided and it came into force on 19 July. Now you can understand in such a quick span how did this happen. So here we can see the picture of socialism versus capitalism. At 8:30 p.m. on the night of 19 July 1969, Indira Gandhi addressed the nation on radio and announced the nationalization of the banks. This was the first trigger to the emergency. Now we will see the second trigger, that is Indira Gandhi versus the judiciary, basically the Supreme Court. The question is, why the battle broke out between Indira Gandhi government and the courts? One of the shareholder of Central Bank of India, Mr. R.C. Cooper, approached the Supreme Court to get the justice. The court declared that the law enacted by the government was discriminating against 14 banks which were nationalized, and it was unfair for the shareholders. Therefore, the ordinance was rejected by the court. Now, we'll see, as per your opinion, who shall be more powerful, the judiciary or the legislature? Comment me below. Now, when the ordinance got rejected, the Indira Gandhi government brought a new amendment to the constitution in the immediate next year, and this amendment reversed the Supreme Court's judgment. The 25th Amendment sought irrevocably to divest the Supreme Court of the power to go into the quantum of compensation. Now, there was another conflict which took place in Indira Gandhi's government, and judiciary was regarding the privy purses. This was another trigger to the calling of the emergency. Let me explain to you about the privy purse concept first. Privy purse used to be the payment which were given to the royal families of the princely states in India. This was given because a condition was laid down which stated the government will give payment to the ruling families. The paper cutting depicts the same thing. The princely era fades into history. Now, the conflict arose when the government introduced bill to abolish the privy purse. However, the bill was not passed in the Rajya Sabha, so the government came up with a proclamation that the princely states would cease to be recognized as such. Thus, there will be no more ruling family in the country, and technically, which indirectly indicates that there will be no need of privy purses. Now, the matter reached the Supreme Court, and the verdict of the Supreme Court was the proclamation was termed as null and void. Therefore, the proclamation was not considered by the Supreme Court and it was termed as null and void. Then again, Indira Gandhi government addressed another constitutional amendment which clearly mentions that privy purse would be abolished for the ruling families, and judgment of the court was thus reversed in 1971. This incident altogether influenced the decision of declaring an emergency. In 1971, Indira Gandhi wins the election again and becomes a very dominant Prime Minister. Under her, centralization of power was evident, and it is said that Chief Minister of various states, including the cabinet ministers, were being selected by Indira Gandhi based on who favored by her. In 1971, Indo-Pakistan War took place and it led to the terrible impact on the Indian economy that resulted in inflation. The prices of essential commodities were going high and it increased rapidly, Along with that, the crude oil prices were also increased on a larger scale. On the other hand, the corruption entered the central government and the state government. The Gujarat state government was dissolved at that time due to public demand, and an appeal of dissolving Bihar government was on queue. Another leader, George Fernandez, carried 3 days long railway strike in 1974 for demanding better working condition and better salary for railway workers, and it marked the largest industrial strike in the world at that time, which included 17 lakh people. Here we'll see the chart. First of all, check the picture where we can see riots are happening and strikes are going on. Police is on control, the crowd, the rush, the riots which is taking place, and the total country was under disturbance. Therefore, constant strikes led to inflation, and inflation led to the price rise, which created the situation of unending protest. Later, it is a result of allegation of corruption. This was the condition of the country in 1975. In March 1975, a judgment was passed against Indira Gandhi by Allahabad High Court, which related to the election malpractice. This is the major trigger to this calling of emergency. Here you can see Indira Gandhi and Raj Narayan, who is a socialist election candidate and a freedom fighter. This is a famous case law, Raj Narayan versus Indira Gandhi, and vice versa, Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. Raj Narayan accused Indira Gandhi directly that she won her seat in the election using unfair means, and she has manipulated the ballots. This was the major allegation which was given by Raj Narayan to Srimati Indira Gandhi. And simultaneously, 14 crimes were reported against her. However, she was only convicted for 2 crimes by the court. These are the 2 crimes for which she was convicted are given. She was using UP government to build a huge stage to give her speech. And the second one is Indira Gandhi's election against Yashpal Kapoor, who was a government employee even at the time of elections, which was technically wrong. So, due to these 2 crimes, the court decided Indira Gandhi's Lok Sabha seat was null and void. This was the first punishment which was given. Now, Indira Gandhi moved to Supreme Court to appeal this judgment. The judges of the Supreme Court stated that all her privileges can be withdrawn and she will not be able to vote or contest the election for next 6 years. This was again the trigger and the punishment which was given to her. But she remained the Prime Minister until next hearing. Due to this, the protest of the opposition increased in larger scale. I hope you can understand the situation of India at that time then. Such a dark phase for India, isn't it? As per Article 352 of Constitution of India, an emergency can be declared by the President of India if India's security is threatened by war or external aggression or internal disturbances, and the emergency of 1975 was the result due to internal rebellion. Finally, the day has occurred and the proclamation of the emergency took place. You can see so many news, so many paper cuttings regarding that particular day. On this day, infamous internal emergency was imposed. The biggest attack on democracy took place in India on June 25, 1975, where emergency was imposed in the country. The then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, abrogated all fundamental rights, imposed censorship on the press, imprisoned opposition leaders. This day was considered as a black day in Indian democracy. Emergency was proclaimed by our ex-Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi. According to a report of International Human Rights Organization, 1,40,000 people had been arrested without trial. Then Congress PM Srimati Indira Gandhi's emergency. State of emergency was declared. Several leaders were arrested, riots were suspended, and so many incidents took place. The situation was not peaceful at all. On 25th June 1975, Gandhi consulted with her ministers and sends a written note to President Farooquddin Ali Ahmed, the then President, Mr. Farooquddin Ali Ahmed, requesting that he declare internal emergency. In contrary, and he agrees to Indira Gandhi and declares emergency in the country. Within few hours, many opposition leaders got arrested like Mr. L.K. Advani, Charan Singh, Moraji Desai, J.P. Narayan. Along with that, governments, the powers in the government offices, the government cuts the power supply to the newspaper offices in Delhi that night, so that the newspaper could not print anything for the next day. In the next morning, it was announced in the radio by Srimati Indira Gandhi regarding the emergency. Hope in this video, online legal vakil had done enough justification to explain you the situation of the emergency of 1975. Let me know in the comment section which type of videos you guys are looking for. Thank you so much for watching. Please continue with us and do subscribe to our channel to help us to grow.